Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, no, October 19th, 2022. We are in the book of 1 Samuel. We're at chapter 17, and this is one of the famous stories of David. This is David and Goliath, and we'll read this familiar story and we'll look at why it's important. A lot of people remember the big details, the big ideas of the story part, but why is it important? People very often miss the main connections. Chapter 16, Samuel had anointed David, and he had entered King Saul's service, and he was harpist for the king. He was also a armor bearer, and let's just jump into the story. Chapter 17, verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Succoth in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim, between Succoth and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped at the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with a valley between them. So Saul has been successful as king. He has kept it so that it's whole armies that have to invade. It's not just raiding parties anymore. And the Israelites are their own country. Saul is the one taxing them. He's got servants, but he doesn't enslave people. And the Philistines now feel threatened because they have a major empire to their south with Egypt. They have a growing nation to the north with Israel, and they're no longer nominally in charge of Israel. They can no longer just go send a raiding party out to go collect booty and taxes and income and get slaves, and their economy is hurting, and so they're attempting to reassert their control over Israel, and they're assembling their whole army and invading with a whole army. And Saul is opposing that. He's bringing his army together. He's gotten discipline in the army. And so they've set up camp on either side of a valley. They each hold the high ground because the high ground, of course, is the strategic place. And they're basically camping on opposite hills and opposing each other. Haven't yet engaged in battle. They're doing that pre-battle assessment and trying to figure out some way to get an advantage. And the way warfare was done then is hand-to-hand combat. Basically, large groups of men marched into each other. Of course, the first one down the hill has a disadvantage because the other side could be attacking them with range weapons of some sort, spears and arrows and rocks and slings and things like that, while they're attacking. The attacking force has the disadvantage. And they're sitting there staring at each other, threatening each other, hoping to intimidate one side so that the side that starts being more intimidating and the other side starts melting away, then they have the advantage. And even though they're on attack, it's probably more even. And then when they actually do engage battle, they have a severe advantage. And, this is the state of things. They have picked a spot that is largely farmland. There's not a lot of population there. They're standing on opposite sides of a valley. And they're far enough apart that range weapons aren't going to threaten the other side, but they're close enough to see each other. And a person with a good volume production can stand on one hillside and shout to the other and be heard. And that's the setup. Verse 4. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Just to translate the weights, his armor weighed 125 pounds. His javelin was 15, or the head on it was 15 pounds. So he's a massive man. He's really tall. He's got some really heavy armor. He's obviously strong enough to carry it. I might be able to, if you load me down carefully, carry 125 pounds of armor. But I'd have to have it because I'd probably be pretty much useless other than walking straight forward. You'd think I'm a sitting target in hand-to-hand combat. Having a javelin with an iron head of 15 pounds, wearing 125 pounds of armor, I probably wouldn't be able to use it. He's a massive man, half again taller than me, if you want to picture that. A very strong man. And in the days of hand-to-hand combat, where reach and length and strength matter a great deal, let's face it, he's going to have a arm length reach that's longer than anybody else. He's going to be able to, bear a weapon that's longer than anybody else's. He basically doesn't have to play defense. He's on the attack all the time when he's engaged in battle, because he can outreach anybody, and he depends upon being able to just be able to attack without being attacked. He's got armor that's designed to stop missiles, stop arrows and spears and rocks, and he has the strength to carry it. And he's sitting there. He's not going to worry about the missiles that hit him, and he's going to go and attack. And this is intimidating. I met some man on the street that was wearing bronze armor and a bronze helmet with a big javelin with a 15-pound head on it strapped to his back, that was half again taller than me. I'd be intimidated even in peaceful America. If you're on the battlefield and this is a warrior, I definitely would be intimidated. I would be like, do I have some archers that are good enough that they know they can put an arrow through his eye from distance? And let's see if we can do that. Can we put one through his neck? Can you throw enough spears at him at once that he can't dodge them all? That something will hit something vital. That's the kind of way that the opposing General King has to think. How do we take this guy out? Because if he leads a charge, it doesn't matter who's with him. If they're normal size or even smaller than normal, he's going to be a massive undertaking. You're going to have a bunch of people to take him down. And it just takes a few people to defend his weak spots, and you then have to have more people than you can put on into a piece of battle to take him down. Verse 8. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistine's words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Um, I understand their terror. He's proposing one-on-one combat, champion to champion, and the winner take all. You don't have to fight whole armies. Um, and if this were a fair fight, that might even be okay. It's clearly not a fair fight. And we'll go through the story. The Philistines, if they lose this battle, which they don't plan on losing it, they're not going to um, take it as defeat. They're going to enter battle. If they win, they're going to claim they won. If Goliath wins, they're going to claim they won. So it's a rigged contest all the way around. The thing is, they're doing this because they've been losing for as long as Saul has been king, since the first day. They've been losing. God has been blessing Israel, and Saul has been organizing his army, and they've kept the Philistines contained. They've caught them out of the country. Saul is in charge of Israel. They actually have a king. The Philistines aren't coming in on raiding parties, and they aren't. They're no longer in charge of the southern part of the kingdom of Israel. Uh, it actually is a country, and it's defending its borders, and they're hurting because now all they have to depend upon is trade, and you've got to come out of Israel, go through Philistia, and then go down to Egypt, or come out of Egypt, go through Philistia, and come up to Israel. And you can't set prices too high, or the will go, well, let's sail from the port at Memphis and go through the Mediterranean, or let's go through the desert because Moab and Edom don't charge that much in taxes. It'll be a little longer, but you know, you, the economics are against them now, and they've been depending upon enslaving the Israelites and taxing them and getting their agricultural produce for themselves just because they were stronger and meaner, and now that's not true anymore. And they're getting to the situation where they know they have to do something desperate, and then this huge giant of a guy shows up. He grows up and he becomes a warrior, and he gets big enough that he can handle some real um, weapons. Let's face it, a 15-pound head on a javelin, he can swing that thing as a battle hammer. He can swing it as a battle axe. He can stab with it. Um, he can throw it. Um, you know, it. He's got a powerful weapon directly, and if he can handle it correctly, you know, he's a powerful man. We learn later he does have a sword. It's not his primary weapon. Um, he's big. He can outreach people. He's not a fair one-on-one fight. And he is defying Israel. And he's defying Saul. And, you know, in battles before a certain point in time that happened late Middle Ages, early modern era in Europe, later in other parts of the world. When two armies came together, they would normally, you know, before they engage in battle, they would set the terms of what was going to be won and lost before they engaged in battle. Um, if they won, if they lost, what was going to be engaged. Um, Middle Ages, that became very formalized, where before you engaged in battle, the two delegations, generally the kings or the generals or their ambassadors, met in a small tent or table between the two armies where everybody could watch what's going on. And they came in peace, they negotiated, and um, they negotiated what was going to happen. If we win, we get to tax you. If you win, you get to tax us, or whatever the battle conditions were. They also very often, at these negotiations, tried to negotiate peace before they fought, because sometimes the grievances needed to be settled, but they don't have to be settled by war. You don't have to kill men, um, and it's better on both sides if you can come to an agreement, as long as nobody's too uh, caught up in this. You can set good terms and walk away peacefully. And you know, Philistines weren't going to have any fair settlement. Uh, Basically, Goliath is their negotiator, and he's shouting out terms. We're going to enslave you, or you're going to enslave us. And let's do this single combat. We don't have to have all the armies fight. He's hoping to win a psychological victory and or win a single hand-to-hand combat, and then, you know, win the war. You know, no point in risking all of his relatives and neighbors and his community and his nation and the other four allied nations. He was from Gath, so he was from that one city in their little kingdom state. The Philistines were 5 kingdom states. And Philistines thought they had a winning strategy here. Um, you know, if they take him up, then great, and he wins, and we get to be in charge again. And if they don't take him up, then we can say they're scared, and we have the psychological advantage. And we, you know, God had other ideas. Saul didn't see a way through because he wasn't depending on God. He didn't, and he was just scared. He knew he had to oppose the Philistine army. He couldn't just turn tail and run. And he's a bold man. He's a good warrior. He's a good king as far as that goes. He's leading the army into battle. Um, and they're sitting there. He knows as long as they don't attack, he doesn't have a disadvantage. He doesn't have a champion that can go up against Goliath, and he knows that. He doesn't want to see somebody killed just to start the battle. Um, he knows that if he attacks the other army, even though they're on Israelite territory, they have the disadvantage of having to cover a bunch of ground before they get there, and the Philistine defenses, they can be on the offensive with range weapons before they get there, and they're going to be at the big disadvantage. He doesn't have the battle smarts that later kings will have of figuring out how to divide up the army into multiple ways and attacking and setting up ambushes and attacking flanks and things like that. The main tactics of the day is you get two groups of army together and you run them at each other, and they do hand-to-hand combat, and by the end of the day we see who has more left on each side. Lots of bloodshed, lots of damage, and not necessarily real clear victories sometimes. And sometimes one side gets routed and sometimes they don't. And so the Philistines think they have a big advantage here. Verse 12. Now David was the son of an Ephraimite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judea. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second was Abinadab, and the third Shema. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep in Bethlehem. So, because he's not big enough to be considered a warrior, and he's basically Saul's bodyguard in peaceful times. And Jesse has contributed sons to the war effort. 3 sons, 3 out of 8, that was sufficient. The other 5 could stay back home and keep the home front going. It wasn't, didn't have to have everybody. David's the youngest. Yeah, he's in Saul's service. He can play the harp, blah blah blah. But on a battle, you don't want a harp player. Yeah, harp player's kind of useless on battle. They consider him too small, too runny to actually be armor bearer during a battle. He's good armor bearer during peacetime. So Saul sends David back home and says, go help your father, go tend the sheep. Your 3 older brothers are going to be in the war with me. That's sufficient. Your father's duty, their family's duty is being fulfilled by them. Go help your dad. And so he sends David back home. It's a reasonable thing to do. It's a very kingly thing to do. You don't take running guys into battle in hand-to-hand combat. You don't take the small young ones. They're not battle hardened. They don't have the training. He's been training him, sure, but he doesn't know David's heart. He doesn't know David's strength. Well, and Jesse wants his sons supplied, so he's sending food to his sons. He's wanting hear news back from his sons. So he's sending his son David, that he knows is reliable, can handle himself in situations, and is sending food by David to his sons, to the army, and getting news back. And instead of leaving him out in the field with the sheep, he's using him as the errand boy. The other 4 brothers can take care of the sheep and whatever else needs to be taken care of at the house. It's a family farm, and they can handle it. Jesse can do, his share of the work. For the war effort, the 3 older sons can go fight. And so he's going back and forth between tending sheep when he's not needing to take supplies in and taking supplies in. In that day and time, particularly on home turf, Saul did not supply everything the army needed. He didn't have that big of an administration. He didn't have that kind of wealth. He didn't have that big a standing army. When they collected an army like this was citizen soldiers, and each family, each clan supplied what their men needed. And so, each clan would have somebody essentially every few days or every day take in the supplies, the food that it took to feed those men and come back. And if somebody needed something repaired, they'd find out, oh, you need new shoes. Okay, well, next time I come back, I'll have shoes for you or whatever. And that's the way that worked, is everybody supplied their own people. And there was a constant stream of people coming in and going and supplying the army. And a well-disciplined army, if your family didn't make it with food today, your battle buddies would supply you, but when they show up with food, you better supply them back, kind of thing. so David is the one that walks back and forth, supplying his brothers. Verse 16. For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses, the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So Jesse sends what he has. Um, an ephah is about 3/5 of a bushel, so he's sending roasted grain. It's an easy, convenient food. It takes no prep. The prep's already done at the house. You roasted it. It is slightly puffed. And don't think of it as puffed as, say, um, uh, puffed rice or puffed wheat cereal or anything like that, or popcorn. It's kind of crunchy. Think more like corn nuts in texture, except it's the size of a piece of wheat, or about twice the size of a piece of wheat. So it's a little bit bigger. It's very durable. As long as you keep it dry, it will stay good for several years. Now, it loses its flavor in about 6 months. If the army's out in the field for 6 months, they're already in trouble. So he's sending, for 3 guys, he's sending probably about 2 weeks worth of food. Um, Drinking water out of a stream and maybe eating some green weeds that are edible weeds that you can pick. You can have a complete meal. Um, and so, uh, and then he sends some loaves of bread. Um, the loaves of bread are not going to last as long, therefore, immediate consumption. Um, as soon the day or two that you know, but with 3 guys, 10 loaves of bread, and let's face it, the loaves of bread they're talking about are not the size of loaves we're used to. Um, they took a kneading board worth of flour and they baked a loaf of bread. It was, uh, some of those loaves of bread were 25 pounds. So he's not talking a little bit of bread. He's planning on feeding the whole unit for a few days, some bread. And then they have, grain, roasted grain, which you can take along in a bag under your armor and eat a handful if you need to. If you're resting up from battle and you're hungry, you can step out for a moment and get into a safe spot, and you can eat a little bit and get back to it. It's a portable food. It's durable. You don't have to have a fire to eat it. He's supplying his sons well, and he's giving them enough that they can last for a while. And 10 cheeses for the commander, so he's giving the commander a gift, but the commander's not going to eat 10 cheeses. From the archaeological evidence, most of their loaves of cheeses were in the 2 to 5 pound loaves size. So 10 cheeses, 20 pounds of cheese to 50 pounds of cheese he's sending. He's not sending something the commander's going to eat directly. Oh, sure, the officer's going to eat of it probably more than the guys, but the commanding officer can then portion it up and hand cheese out to all his men and go, hey guys, I hope your parents have sent you some bread or some grain. Um, uh, the flatbread they typically ate daily. Think of tortillas. Because, hey, I got a slab of cheese here, and everybody gets so much cheese every day. And, everybody can be supplied. And from their viewpoint, they would have been eating very well to have fresh cheese and bread and roasted grain and water. And for army fare in that day and time, that was high fare. So Jesse is giving good things to the army to supply them. And he's being generous. Uh, he's obviously fairly wealthy with 8 sons that are all loyal to him. And so, he's got some good agricultural production. He's probably not sending the whole profit from the year. He's probably just sending what they would eat at the length of time he's expecting them to be there. And he's meaning to supply more than is necessary so that food is not the issue. Um, let's face it, if he's a farmer and this is his what he can spare, um, you know, it's it's cheap to send what you have abundance of, and so he's sending what he has, and he tells David where it is, and David goes. Verse 20. Early in the morning, David left the flock with the shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle position, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies and ran to the battle lines and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. So David, after 40 days of these armies facing each other and not engaging in battle, David finally gets there with the supplies, and he happens to get there at the time of the challenge. Now, it said that Goliath did the challenge every morning and every evening. He left in the morning, um, probably, dark or dawn or first light kind of time. Um, it's not that far, you know, to where he's going to battle. Um, if the battle goes wrong, the Philistine army could be in Bethlehem um, by the end of the day. So it's not, the supply line is not that far. A boy can travel it with his donkey easily in a day. Um, Most people assume he showed up when they uh, with the morning challenge because of the events that happened after this. Um, the morning challenge would have been 2 to 4 hours after dawn. That would have been an awfully fast trip for David. Uh, he would have been running that poor donkey carrying all that grain and stuff, or running himself carrying it. I kind of doubt that. On the other hand, getting there in time for the evening challenge is a reasonable time. He would have had to move quickly all day, but he could have done it easily. And it's not that hard. He does the right thing. When he gets there, he finds the keeper of supplies, the quartermaster, and he unloads his stuff and leaves them there. He knows he's going to take the animal home and probably the containers, or maybe pick up empty containers from the last trip he's made before, uh, and go back home. But he's not just there to supply the army. He's there to supply the army, but not just to supply the army. He's there to go see how his brothers are and bring word back. And so he's go meet them. Well, they're out in battle formation. They're lined up. The two armies are facing each other, challenging each other. And this has been happening daily for over a month. And nobody has engaged in battle yet. The Philistines are wanting to see a hand-to-hand combat and see Goliath take out somebody, um, and so they can claim that they get to be in charge. And the Israelites are not so stupid as to go, who's going to offer themselves up for suicide mission? Um, on the other hand, they're not going to give up the fight either. So they all stand on either side of the valley and, you know, get ready in case the other side invades, but nobody's doing anything. And the whole time, Goliath is shouting defiance, and he's winning the psychological war. And the longer they stay there, the harder this becomes to sustain for both sides. Now, the Israelites do have a shorter supply line and better agricultural land, so they can actually keep their army on the battlefield easier. As you can tell, a boy can take, a lot of grain, a lot of bread, and a lot of cheese safely to the army and be back. And Jesse has a reasonable expectation he could take it, talk to his brothers, and get back in the same day. So we're talking. The Israelites, they actually have a fairly easy supply chain uh, logistics problem. The Philistines are a little different. They're a little further from their supply chains. It's going to take some really organized supply chain. On the other hand, uh, they think they have a winning strategy, and so they're sit there at a stalemate. Nobody is engaging in battle. Nobody's getting hurt. We're just playing war, not doing anything. That situation can't go on forever, but who can last longer? Who has to abandon the battlefield? Um, and when David gets there, Goliath makes his challenge, and the Israelites are afraid and they fall back. Verse 25. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel." Um, David just overhears this conversation. The soldiers are trying to psych each other up. Hey, what kind of reward? I mean, that's a really good reward. Taxes are not onerous, but on the other hand, if your whole family is exempt from tax, that's really really rich. Uh, you know, it might be a significant chunk of the profits from the family that are taxed. So, hey, not having to be taxed is a definite advantage. And being married to the king's daughter, um, being part of the royal family, even if you're a nobody, suddenly your family becomes somebody. And, you know, that's worth doing. And if you have some self confidence, that might be enough to send somebody guy out and like, well, I don't have a wife and I can have an important wife and I can be somebody important. Yeah, I'll take this home. It might be worth risking my life for if you can figure out how to do it. Um, you know, and David's overhearing this and going, remember the Spirit of God is on David. And so God's going to be showing him Goliath's weaknesses and Goliath's strengths and what he can do and what he can't do. And David is used to tending sheep out in the wilderness where he has no one to help him. And he has faced grave situations and he's had to handle it on his own. And he's learned to handle them. He's a brave man. And he's learned to find the weaknesses. Verse 26, David asked the man standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Now, understand David's heart. He doesn't just see this as a challenge to the army and that somebody might die. He sees that Goliath is challenging God himself. And he depends upon God, and he is seeking God's authority and God's strength, and he knows that God has made promises to Israel. And he wants to know, hey, what reward does King Saul plan to give the guy that wins? So David is hearing this and thinking, yeah, I can do this. This guy is barely bigger than the bear. We'll learn about the bear in a minute. But, he's barely bigger than a bear. And he has some disadvantages the bear doesn't have, like he's carrying all that weight. And, I beat the bear. I beat the lion. The lion's tougher than the bear. You know. And so, he's hearing this challenge and he's determined to honor God's name. We know something about David right there about what he's concerned about. He's concerned about God's honor and that knowing God will honor himself. We already see a difference between David and Saul. David, Saul, the first time he ends up, he's scared and he's still scared. David is defiant and concerned about God's honor. That's part of the big difference here. Goliath is just depending upon his great size and intimidation, his long arms, and his heavy armor to defend him, and his reach and heavy weapon to be his attack, and being able to outmuscle anybody they send out and outreach them, and being able to kill somebody easily and quickly in one-to-one combat, and win. And he's hoping he can be the champion and the winner, because let's face it, the Philistines are going to honor him. He's going to be an honored champion. If he can kill one guy and they win, you know, everybody will give him credit for the rest of his life. And he's probably used to being a bully at his size. He's probably used to, just marching through, and if you don't get out of the way and give him respect, he'll make you get out of the way. This is he's either been taught to be a very gentle giant or he's been taught to be a bully. Well, you see his defiance on the battlefield. We know he's not a gentle giant. Verse 27, they repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. So they repeat what David had overheard, and he gets it confirmed that this is standing policy. This isn't like hearsay, people are making rumors. He's confirming that actually it's the truth. It's what Saul means to give to the man that defeats Goliath. Verse 28, when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? With whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now, does that sound like an older brother? He's seeing the young kid and he thinks he's been irresponsible and come down just to watch the excitement, and he's just going to be in the way and he's going to be annoying and the tag along, and can't you see the big brother coming at him, accusing him of being lazy and just thrill seeking and being irresponsible. Eliab doesn't see that his father Jesse had sent David with significant number of supplies to make sure the army's well fed and supplied, and that David was supposed to bring news back, and that David heard, and he calls him conceited. He knows that he is bold, and he knows that when he hears that, he's going to think about, how can I win? And the older brother says, you're conceited. We now know why God told Samuel, this is not the man. Eliab would have been another Saul. In fact, this is one of the last times in Scripture we see him. We don't know why. But it's obvious he's not a guy that's going to honor God. Uh, you know, because he's accusing David of what's in him. Verse 29. Now, what have I done? Said David. Can I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the man answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. Now, David's response to his older brother, what have I done? Dad sent me here. I you're just making stuff up. Um, can't you see this brother interaction? I lived in a neighborhood where um, there was lots of brothers around. Across the street, three brothers. The older one just barely older than me, the middle one just barely younger than me, and then the younger brother that was the tag along. Down the street, four brothers. They were all considerably older than me, but you could still see the brother interactions going on. You know, Next door, a brother and two sisters, the brother being the middle one. You know, I saw lots of brother interactions, brother sister interactions. Further down the street, four brothers. The eldest one between me and the middle brother across the street in age, and then three younger ones. I saw lots of brother interactions, and this reads almost like something that I saw, almost on a daily basis growing up. Brothers interacting, the little one being somewhat of a rule breaker and somewhat defiant of the authority of the older ones thinking he's a young dweeb tag along, interfering, and then both being somewhat contemptuous of each other, but loving each other very strongly. Now, growing up, I didn't understand the concept of brotherly love well. Um, it didn't seem to express as love. Um, and I would read that phrase and think it's an oxymoron because I observed what I observed, and it seemed like, from my only child perspective, that wasn't love. Now, Eliab was actually loving David. He was telling him, "You're too small. You're too young. Don't get involved. You're not ready for this. Let real men, real soldiers handle it. Don't get in over your head. Don't get conceited." Um, on the other hand, David is making sure that what he overheard is not just rumor. He's getting it, making sure he's getting it from multiple sources, and he knows that if the tale gets different every time he hears it, or somebody else says, "No, that's just them speaking. It's a rumor that's going around, but King hadn't announced it. None of his officials have announced it." Then David knows, okay, it's just a rumor. If he gets it from multiple sources and it's the same, he knows it's probably true. And with him asking questions, somebody in charge overhears him and reports him to Saul that, hey, there's somebody out there in the camp that is seriously thinking about this. And so Saul sends for this guy. Hey, we have somebody that thinks they can do this. I want to talk to him. Let's break this impasse. 40 days out here and it's not fighting a war is just not the way it needs to do. Even if the guy dies, we need to break this impasse. If he looks like he's fixing to be defeated, maybe it's then time to go charge Goliath and change the tide of war while everybody's engaged and watching. We might get a chance, but we got to send somebody. If somebody's fixing to volunteer, somebody's interested in my offer of the family gets tax free and they get to marry my daughter, I want to talk to them. Verse 32. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." So David is bold and brave, and he has already seen that God can give him the victory. He's not coming unprepared. You know, we tend to tell this story like David is inexperienced. Well, he has no warrior experience, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just arrogantly bold, and he comes up, and God gives him victory anyway. I don't think that's the case. I think David already has a strategy for how am I going to defeat Goliath. He already thinks I can do this, and he knows God's heart. He knows that God will defend him, and he has this bold confidence in his faith in God. This isn't a human battle. This is a spiritual battle, and he knows that. Who has the faith to do it? The Philistines, depending upon himself and his false gods. David is depending upon the living God that, talked to Abraham, talked to Isaac, talked to Jacob, changed Jacob's name to Israel, gave 12 patriarchs to Jacob, and took them down into Egypt and grew them from a few dozen people to a massive nation, brought them out of the superpower and destroyed their army, brought them through the desert for 40 years in safety. They invaded the land and have run the people out, and the people that used to live there no longer exist. And David knows this, and David has this faith that somehow I am going to win because I am God's man. Let's face it, he remembers God anointed him as king. So he has confidence God's going to keep me alive. I'm going to win. And I see a way to do it. Let's see if I can do this. And I have enough faith in God. I'm going to brag on my God that he can do it. David has that bold, outrageous faith it takes. And he's saying it confidently to his king. And let's face it, he knows Saul. He's played the harp for him. He's bore armor for him. He's heard him do statecraft. Verse 33. Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy, and he's been a fighting man from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David has a bold faith. And let's face it, if you've done hand-to-hand combat with a lion or a bear, and you've taken a sheep out of its mouth, and then when it attacks you because you robbed it of its food, its meal, you killed it, you're already a warrior. You're already bold. You've already handled weapons. You've already, in one sense, the lion and the bear are both better warriors than this Philistine that has so much weight on him and has such a big, heavy weapon. Um, Even if he's strong, he can't swing it fast. If David's light and nimble, he can probably evade it, and you know we know what he does. But you know, David is thinking many options. Let's face it, he didn't kill the lion and the bear by slinging a stone at them and killing them, and then going in and rescuing the sheep. That's not what he said he did. He said he came and took the sheep out of their mouth, and then when it attacked, when he stole its lunch, then he killed it. So he's doing that with probably a sword. Um, and let's face it, what kind of bravery and gumption does it take to attack a lion that's got a sheep or a bear that's got a sheep? Um, you know, he's bold. He's brave. And he knows he can handle this Goliath. That, okay, it's a little bit bigger than the bear, maybe no stronger though, and slower moving, and less wary. And David knows he won. Um, Last part of verse 37. Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Uh, Saul is impressed. You got the guts. I'm giving you my blessing because I want to see this. I want to. I want to see this impasse broken, and you know, and so he's giving a formal blessing, uh, hoping this works. Verse 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. So David tries on King Saul's armor because King Saul wants to have him uh, supplied as best he can. And let's face it, Saul has probably the best armor anybody in the army has. And so he goes, well, you can borrow it, and you know, and David tries it on and tries walking around in it just because he's not used to it. And then second half of verse 39, I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of the shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached Philistine. Now we know he has a sword because he put his sword on over. So he's got a sword, he's got a staff, he's got a shepherd's bag and a sling. He's got 5 smooth stones from the stream. So he's picked stones that will be good for his sling. And we know that he has experience with a sling. Now, a sling is a shepherd's weapon of choice because with it you can throw a rock um, properly used. You can throw the rock further than you could shoot an arrow. We know from a little bit later, David had slingers that could throw a stone an arrow shot distance and hit within a hairbreadth of what they were aiming for. They had some sort of contest, and he had a whole group of them that were that kind of accurate. We don't know what size stones these were, but they probably weren't any bigger than a fist, probably smaller. We very often picture a pebble, but from the damage it did to Goliath, it was not just a pebble. He probably had a nearly fist-sized rock. He picked smooth ones so it would fly straight and smooth and in a predictable trajectory. The shepherds used them because you could stand on the top of the hillock, watch the sheep eating around you on the hill and the valley, and if you saw a predator, sling a stone and hit the predator. And okay, if you damaged or killed the predator, great. But let's face it, the lion, the bear, the wolf, um, if they got hit by a rock, they're going to be startled. They're going to jump and run. They're wary, and they're going to leave. You don't have to win if you throw the rock a great distance. You only have to um, scare it off. If it decides these sheep are not worth attacking, uh, I'm not coming around these sheep again. You've been sufficient. The predator can go eat a rat or a mouse or you know some other varmint. As long as he's not eating my sheep, you're one. You don't necessarily even have to hit the predator. You crash a stone between his feet, and he goes, "That's too close for comfort," and he leaves. So but David is apparently pretty good aim with it. Um, is used to hitting the predators, and he takes stones big enough that if he hit the predator, he's going to do some serious damage to it or kill it. And he's apparently used to doing this and defending his sheep. And you know, so he's done this before, and you can see because he starts with his sling in his hand with stones in his bag. He's not coming out there swinging the sling, threatening Goliath. He's coming out there looking like I'm an innocent little boy that don't know what's going on, and I'm going to come out here and you're going to have an easy time. He wants Goliath overconfident. He knows that he can grab a rock out of the bag, swing it up to speed, and throw it very fast because in a wild animal attack on a sheep, you don't have 10 seconds to wind up and aim and throw. And, you know, you may have one swing around and you got to release, and you got to release it accurately. He's used to that fast response. He knows he has the fast response. He has this plan. If I can do damage to him before he gets into his arm range at a long distance, I have a big advantage. As long as I can stay out of his weapon range, he figures 5 stones, he'll hit something vital. And he has confidence in God that God's going to help him. He said that already. So we know that he's dependent upon God, and he's dependent upon God that this time I will have the perfect aim. He's practiced a lot out in with the sheep. Let's face it, out in the tending sheep, it's kind of a boring job. Most of the time, all they're doing is staying around eating grass, chewing. Uh, what do you do while you do that? Well, you practice things like throwing stones. You pick a target and you throw a stone, and throw a stone, and throw a stone, and you learn what stones throw well and sling well, and you get practiced at, oh, this is a good stone, and that's not, and so that when things happen in a hurry, um, if you have to pick one up off the ground, you can pick one up off the ground in a hurry, or you can have one in your shepherd's bag ready to go. So as you grab the sling out, you can grab the stone out, and he comes out just holding probably what to Goliath looks like. Um, he's coming at me with a leather strap. Okay, he's got a staff in his hand. He's got a sword on, but he's coming out with a leather strap in his hand. I understand what Goliath sees. We know how this turns out, so we know that there's, David has a superior strategy. Verse 41, meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at with me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." So Goliath sees him, and he sees a little boy, no armor, no serious weapons. He sees the staff in his hand is the most vital weapon he has, and it's a stick. You know, it's not even like his javelin. His hand is big, heavy. It's a shepherd's staff. It's not a strong weapon. It's more of a walking stick and something to help retrieve sheep with than you know a weapon. Sure, um, against an unarmed foe, to whack a uh, somebody who attacks you and convince them to run off, or attack a wolf or a lion or a bear, and you know convince them it's not worth the risk to eat this meal, and get them scared and go off. It's a great tool, but it's not a lethal weapon. And he despises this, and he laughs at it. And God's giving him overconfidence here. I think this is part of God's strategy, that God wants Goliath thinking, this is too simple. And he's not going to be wary. He's not going to see the danger that's there. And he boasts. He's very proudful. He's very boastful. And he basically says, I'm going to kill you and let your body rot here. The scavenger birds will eat you, the animals of the field will eat you, and you will rot here. In other words, he's saying, David, I'm not only going to kill you, but your whole army, your whole country is not going to be able to retrieve your body and bury you. I'm going to be so successful that nobody comes to retrieve your dead body. That's what he's saying. He's not just defying David, he's defying the whole army. That this is not an even matchup, and oh man, I despise it. You're one guy, and you're coming against me with my armor bearer carrying stuff in front of me. That's an uneven match. Small boy against two grown warriors? Oh, come on. Really? I'm just going to kill you. And we're not, we're going to defend your body, and you're going to be dishonored by laying at the field to decay. Yeah. Go home. That's what he's saying. Save yourself while you got a chance, because you got no chance. That's what Goliath's saying. Verse 45. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, and I come against you with the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcass of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. So David is defiant, just as Goliath is, but he's confident not in his abilities, but in God, who gives the battle, who causes the battle to be won or lost. And it's God he puts his confidence in. Goliath cursed David by his gods. And the Hebrew is written such as, basically, he's cussing David in his God's names. So he's insulting, he's, not expressing that his gods are going to win. He's just using them to be insulting. David, on the other hand, is not being insulting or belittling. He's just expressing a stout faith that God, Yahweh, the God of Israel, who's done miracles in the past, will do miracles again. And that the Philistine, it's not just Goliath that'll die, it's the whole Philistine army. And then they are the ones that are going to lie in the field and be eaten by the birds of the air and the beasts of the field and not be buried and be defiled. That David is confident that God is in charge and God wins the battles. And he says that. So we have this clear spiritual dimension to this hand-to-hand combat that's fixing to happen. It's not now about who's going to be slaves to who, which is what it was when Goliath made the challenge. It's going to be about which God wins. David is up the battle to whose God is stronger. Now, the Philistines had war gods, and they tried to appease their war gods when they came into battle, and they've got tales that, their war gods have won upon occasion, and when it was impossible odds or hard odds, and, by calculation, it shouldn't have happened, and they did. And, if you think about it, one of those was when they captured the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh. They were thinking they should lose that battle, but they gained strength, and their gods gave them strength, and they won. Well, no, what was going on is Yahweh was disgusted with his people and says, I'm going to teach you a lesson. You're using my holy things as talismans, not depending upon me, and I will honor my own artifacts. Yeah, I'll defend my artifacts, and their gods will worship me. You guys are useless. And the Philistines think they won that because their gods were stronger. No, they won that because God wanted them to win. They don't see the real spiritual battle, but David does. And he knows this same miracle-working God that brought him out of Egypt, that brought him into this land, and brought them to this point where they're a nation, working together as a nation, is going to win this battle too. Because God has put in the spirit of David that it's time for him to start winning this battle. And that means first taking this loudmouth, big thug, bully, off the battlefield. Verse 48. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sunk into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. So, basically the only blow that happened in this battle is when the Philistine starts charging, David charges toward him down the hill. He reaches in the bag, grabs the stone, puts it in the sling, and slings it. He doesn't spend a lot of time swirling it over his head, showing off that he can swing it in circles, try to get it. He's got it down to where he can swing it once and get it up to speed and throw it and be accurate. And he hits him in the forehead where the helmet that was on Goliath's head did not protect him. It hit hard enough that it broke the bone and sunk into the forehead. And that could have been directly a fatal blow. We're going to read here just a verse or two. It was not actually a fatal blow, but it did render Goliath unconscious or incapacitate him to where he couldn't function. I'm going to say he's probably a pretty hard-headed guy. I mean, he's a big guy, so he's likely his bones are strong too, and he's obviously eating well to get that big. Had a lot of good nutrition all his life. He's used to carrying some weight around, weight bearing, and so his bones are going to be stronger. And the body doesn't just make the bones that have to be stronger; it does strengthen them all. So as his leg bones and arm bones and other bones got stronger, his skull would have gotten stronger too. But David is running down the hill, slinging the stone toward him, um, and let's face it, a a stone slung by a sling like that uh, can reach 150 miles an hour if you're really good at it. I wouldn't want to be hitting the head with a stone going 150 miles an hour. Goliath ultimately doesn't want to be either, but he doesn't see the stone coming. He doesn't uh, see that how dangerous it is, and he is depending upon I'm going to close range and take my weapon and strike him down before he gets to where he can touch me with his staff and or grab his sword out. And he's thinking the sword and the staff are the weapons, and he doesn't really picture this sling as all that important. The Philistines were not shepherds. They would not have had a lot of experience with slings. They would not have thought that a sling could have been a war weapon. Um, they would have thought would be an insulting weapon to throw little rocks. Um, they don't understand that they can be aimed well. Um, if you or I try to sling a stone, um, if we hit within a certain distance of somebody, we'd think we aimed well. David's got enough experience; he can throw it exactly at what he wants to hit and hit it. And he's obviously wanting to hit um, Goliath in the head. He's aiming for the head, the face, inside of this helmet. So he's aiming at a very little target. Um, he's depending on God helping him in his aim, and God does. Um, and he hits in the forehead, even smaller target. And it's moving fast enough that it breaks the bone. Um, that kind of force would have shocked the brain enough that Goliath probably was unconscious, uh, probably dying from the shock um, wave that went through the skull. And the shock wave, as it went through the brain, would have done damage, hit the inside of the skull, and come bounding back to do damage the second time through. And, you know, that kind of injury is very often lethal directly in and of itself. Um, verse 50. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from his scabbard. Then he killed him. After he killed him, he cut off the head with the sword. Um, some of the translations translate the Hebrew that's used here to say he killed him with the sword and then cut off his head. The interpretation of the people of that time, if Goliath were still twitching, he's not dead yet. Well, when his head's removed, he's dead. Um, Goliath may have been dead from the blow, but both the Philistines and the Israelites don't know whether he's dead yet or not. David, on the other hand, makes sure he's dead. He's not going to check. Does he still have his heart still beating? No. This is battle. You make sure he's dead. He may have had his sword on his side. He may not have. Some people have said he didn't. That's why he grabbed Goliath's sword. Well, Goliath's sword was probably readily available. Let's face it, Goliath probably had it out to use it. So it's the sword that's available. It's right there, laying right there. Instead of unsheathing his, he can just take this better sword and use it. And the psychological of killing Goliath with his own sword is powerful too. So God has him grab up Goliath's sword. Whether Goliath's dead or not doesn't matter. and he cuts off his head, and of course, holding up the guy's head, everybody can see Goliath's dead. And they will see that David killed him. The Philistines will think with Goliath's own sword, well, that's a great humiliation to be killed with your own sword, to be stripped of your weapon and killed with your own weapon. Um, the Israelites will see David killed Goliath with his own sword, and that their God's stronger because they're going to have heard David's speech and realize that Yahweh has intervened again in their favor. Um, middle verse 51. When the Philistines saw their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Israelites, the Philistines, to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Shaharaim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistines' head and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. So David then, along with the whole Israelite army, chases the retreating Philistine army. When they see their champion dead, they are scared. The psychology of the war has just shifted. Their sure strategy of winning just collapsed. Whether they think in battle terms or in spiritual terms is unclear and unimportant. God is putting a spirit of fear in them. They know that they've lost because their champion has lost. That's the terms that they had set up, and they're now turning tail and running. The Israelites know that God has fought on their side, and this unbeatable champion is dead, has been defeated, and not by great strength of arms, but by a boy. So God's clearly doing it. And they know that God's on their side and they're going to win. And so they have great confidence. And they chase the armies and they chase them all the way to the gates and they kill them along the way. And they even kill them in Philistine territory. And they chase them till they get to the gates. And then they come back. And then they plunder. Take the goods from the Philistine camp. Take what's good. Take weapons and armor and that kind of thing. Take animals and supplies, even tents and things like that. And whatever the men would have left in their tents if they went out to battle. Let's face it, if you bring some money so you can buy supplies along the way, you don't take that to battle. You leave it in the tent with your other supplies, and you go out to battle with just your weapons and your armor and maybe a sack of lunch at most. Yeah, you're going to leave the rest of the supplies you have back in the tents. And the Philistines, when they start running, it's not time to go collapse camp and pack it up. They're in the middle of battle, and you're running for your life, and you go run, try and make it back home. And the Philistines are defeated. The Israelites have the victory. And David goes to Jerusalem. Now, Bethlehem is his home. Jerusalem is still a Jebusite city at this point in time. They haven't totally been run out. They're largely living in peace with the Israelites, but they're still holding on to their stronghold on the hillside, on the hilltop. And but they're friendly enough with the Israelites that if you're coming back from defeating the Philistines, which the Jebusites don't like either, yeah, we'll help you celebrate. And so he takes Goliath's head and the sword to Jerusalem. The thing that's important there is David sees a bigger picture. He's triumphantly coming into what's going to be his capital city, he's already picturing that he is going to rule from this stronghold. He's making his victory parade into his future capital. The people at the time may not see the significance, but by the time they write this down, they see the significance and they make sure they tell us that detail. David is coming home, not to his birth home, but to his capital in victory, like a king would, bearing the head of his enemy and his enemy's weapon. David is making strong prophetic statements about how he's going to rule. He's not going to withstand foreigners being in his country as independents. We'll know later from people in his army that foreigners, as long as they worship Yahweh, can be in his army. If you're worshiping Yahweh, you can be in David's administration and help, and you will be viewed as Israelite. Never mind you were born a Hittite or whatever. You're accepted. So David is not the racial purist that will become part of the Israelite identity later. It's not a racial purity thing yet with them. It's about worshiping Yahweh. But Israelites, as long as they're blood clan, can be worshiping some of the God, and they're still Israelites. But if you want to become an Israelite to worship Yahweh, yeah, we'll let you in easily. And David is marching into his future capital as a conquering king. He sets that precedent from his first battle on. Verse 55, as Saul watched David going out and met the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, Abner, whose son is that young man? Abner replies, as surely as you live, O king, I don't know. The king said, find out whose son this young man is. So Saul doesn't recognize at that moment his harpist and armor bearer. Abner doesn't recognize the harpist that calmed Saul down and Saul's armor bearer. They see something there. This guy's confident, and Saul is asking a question. Hey, I've made the promise that whoever defeats this Goliath, he can marry my daughter. His dad doesn't have to pay taxes. So find out who this is, because I got to keep my promise. He's got to marry my daughter. He's got to. His dad gets to be tax free. This is important. Find out who he is. If you don't know who he is, find out. Make sure we know. Saul is thinking about fulfilling his promise. He is actually a good politician. This is part of what tells me he's a good politician. He is thinking, even before the battle, how am I going to fulfill my promise? I made this promise that whoever attacks the Philistine and wins, I've made this promise, so I kind of know who he is and who his dad is, so his dad doesn't have to pay taxes. I'm gonna honor my word. I'm gonna be a good politician. And he asks his general, Abner. Now, Abner is his cousin. Abner, son of Ner, Kish, son of Ner. So, his uncle. He's got a very sound family-oriented business in this monarchy, and he's trusting this guy that he knows has his back, that's a good commander, and he depends upon in battle. He depends upon him politically. Find out who this guy is. We've got to pay our debts. Verse 57. As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head. Whose son are you, young man? Saul asked him. David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. So, you know, Abner, as soon as he sees David kill Goliath, and the armies are advancing, and he's making sure they do it, he also is fulfilling his king's command. Find out who this guy is. He finds David and brings him to Saul, still holding Goliath's head in his hand, and has Saul interview David. And Saul asks, whose son are you? Because he's planning to fulfill this promise that he made to his men, that this guy marries my daughter, his dad gets to be tax-free, and so he asks the question, and David answers honestly. I'm David. This is, I'm son of Jesse of Bethlehem. David hears that Saul is going to honor the promise that Saul has made that his dad is going to be tax-free. And so, this is where this one ends. And chapter 18 deals with other things, but, David does kill Goliath. It is a spiritual battle, and it is a spiritual battle that God is winning not by strength of arms, but in psychological. And we're already seeing that David is a man of strategy. He doesn't just put a big group of men and hope his group of men fight better than that group of men, or that he has more so that they can just force their way through by sheer number. He thinks about the weaknesses and how to handle the strengths. And he doesn't get within Goliath's sword length of Goliath until Goliath's down. And he depends upon his quick reflexes and being able to sling a stone. He also is using being uphill, going downhill, being able to throw that stone fast, and more importantly, being able to throw it accurately. He had 5 stones, so he did not count on, I'm going to hit with the first stone. I'm going to be able to kill with the first stone. Now, that happened. That is clearly God working in David's strength. David went into battle going, I can probably sling up to 5 stones before I got to do something else. And, hopefully one of them does the job, and I hit something vital, and he's down, and then, we'll go into the next step. Well, the first stone hits probably what's a lethal hit, but nobody on either side, maybe not even David, knows. Afterwards, he's going to make sure. And so he gets there. Obviously, the armor bearer, when he sees Goliath goes down, goes, nah, he's the warrior, I'm out of here. And the armor bearer starts running. And that probably breaks the ranks of the Philistines that, our champion's down, and the armor bearer is getting out of there. They know this guy's, he knows this guy's a warrior. He's seen him up close and personal. And they break ranks and start running. Well, the Israelites see that, and they start chasing. But David goes, picks up Goliath's sword, cuts off Goliath's head, holds it up. He takes it back to the tent. Abner gets him, brings him back to Saul. And then later, he takes Goliath's head and sword to Jerusalem to show even though they don't understand it at the time, that David will rule from Jerusalem. And yeah, we see it as the underdog winning. It's not that the underdog won. God is not the underdog. God will take what looks insignificant, but he knows is made of the right stuff, and make it into the thing God needs. The battle is not to the strong or to the swift, but it is to who? The God, the one God, the great I am, the Lord of lords and King of kings, the Lord of hosts. And that's the Lord of armies, is what that title is. Determines is going to be the winner. And so David was picked because he was a man after God's own heart, and he had faith in God, and he put his confidence in God, not in his own abilities. But God also then used that because it looks like he can't win, it's impossible odds, but David outthinks Goliath. He sees the weakness, he throws the stone. God does guide the stone, but I'm not going to say that it was a miracle that the stone hit Goliath. It's more that God made sure that Goliath didn't move out of the path of the stone. I think David had the skill to throw that stone and hit Goliath in the forehead, and he knew it when he threw it, and he slung it, and he was aiming for that forehead, or at least that face, and God had it hit the right place. But Goliath was so overconfident that his armor and his strength and his size was going to win the day, he ignored a stone coming toward him. And so God used the apparent underdog to win the day. And he then has in David's heart to prophesy that he's going to rule from Jerusalem and take Goliath's head and sword to Jerusalem to celebrate. So David knows Jerusalem when he goes and attacks it. Later, when we get to that, remember, David has already been in Jerusalem. David knows Jerusalem inside and out. Probably David has been doing business in Jerusalem, selling sheep, bull, whatever, buying supplies there. He knows the fortress. He knows the inside. He knows the warriors. And he's already entered it as the conquering hero. And he has the confidence in God to know that he's going to enter it again as the conquering hero. This is not lost on him. He knows he's going to be king. He enters the battle knowing that God's going to protect his king. Confidence that he's going to win. He's trusting God with his life. And he takes risk, bold risk, calculated risk. Let's face it, he doesn't have this impetuous boldness to try to go up and stab Goliath in the neck with his puny little sword by reaching under Goliath's reach and trying to, run in. No, that's what the armor bearer is there to prevent. The armor bearer is going to take a shield and whack David down so that Goliath has a better chance. Let's face it, we talked about that a few weeks ago with Jonathan. Jonathan's armor bearer would knock him down and Jonathan would stab him and kill him. That's the way that was going to fight. The armor bearer was out there with Goliath. David circumvents all that. He's confident he can hit Goliath with the stone. He has 5 of them just in case the first one misses, in case, he blocks it or whatever. But he has backup. But first one does the job, and he hits Goliath in the head, in the forehead, breaks his skull. It sinks in. Um, the the shock, the wave going through the head, the impulse of the stone hitting him, probably liquefies his brain. He's probably dead, even if he's sitting there twitching, not completely dead yet. David makes sure he's dead. He picks up Goliath's sword, cuts off his own head, Goliath's head with it, and holds it up. And, you know, both armies know Goliath's dead. Let's face it, they knew when your head was off your body, you weren't living anymore. Even today, that's we don't have the technology to put your head back on you. I know that there's medical groups talking about preserving heads and being able to do, body transplant or a head transplant or whatever, and have somebody live again. Um, I think that's myth. Medical science might get there. I don't think anybody that's alive today will see it. It's a technology way beyond what we can do right now. It may be time for some medical people to start doing experiments and trying to, you know, transplant rat heads from one rat to another or something, and figure out what the problems and the issues are and how to start solving them, and attempt this. But it's not going to be a technology that's going to happen anytime soon. Yeah, we need to have some confidence we can do it to figure out how to do it. But yeah, it's not going to happen quickly or easily. There's a bunch of problems involved. And they were impossible in that day, as they're impossible today. So David shows unequivocally he won, that God, Yahweh, caused him to win. And Saul is going to make good on his promise. He finds out who he is. And so Saul begins to picture David as somebody important, not just one of the many minions he has under him, but somebody of importance and a favored warrior. Holy Father, we thank you that you are a God powerful enough that you can take what appears to be unimportant and not powerful and cause it to overthrow the powerful and the strong and the boastful. That people who have confidence in you will win, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. For you are the Lord of hosts, the one who wins battles. The battle does not always go with the strong or the swift, but to those who you have favored. And if we put our confidence in you, even though the odds look impossible, you can still cause victory. And that you can make sure the aim of the stone. Yes, David had skill. He probably threw it well. He probably had some confidence that he could hit a small target. But you also made sure it hit the exact right spot. And you were also the God that caused the Philistines, when they saw that, to run in fear. And David to have the confidence to run up and use Goliath's own sword to behead him and hold the head up, so that everybody knew that Goliath was dead, and that then the armies of Israel could chase and win, and you brought back to victory. Lord, you are that kind of God that doesn't consider the odds, because you know the way around the odds of no matter how slim the chance are. If it's your will, it will happen. And you can bring the impossible to fruition. Lord, this is not the first miracle you've done, nor is it the last. The Scripture is full of miracles. And we thank you for one of David's descendants being your Messiah, the King, the Christ, the Anointed One, It's the Lamb of God, the atoning sacrifice that takes away the sin of the world. That your very own Son uh, would come to earth, live among us, die on a cross willingly, and then you would raise him from the dead. That we could have salvation in his name, that we could trust him and trust you, and that salvation is had in the name of Jesus. Lord, help us to be bold in telling that story, telling the other stories of you, that you are the winner no matter what happens. Lord, we enjoy the underdog winning, but this is not really a story about the underdog winning. It's about you beating the arrogant. And thank you for being that God that's living and breathing and does miracles for his people. In your holy name, amen. This has been your host, Frank Reich, and this was recorded on Sunday, October 16th, 2022. I hope to see you Wednesday night at Bible study. I know some of you are going to be on vacation. I will miss y'all, but we'll see you back when you back from your vacation, hopefully rested and relaxed and ready to go again. Um, and if not, I'll see you on YouTube. I hope that you will consider coming to visit with us on Sunday morning or Wednesday evening at either our worship service or the Sunday school hour at 10, the worship hour at 11, or on Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. when we have Bible study. Hope to see you. Y'all have a blessed week.